All right, so a couple of things. Super excited about the generative AI space. Mustaine should have sent you some documents, 3 different pages. Those are brainstorming documents, just kind of to start thinking about, again, trying to think about what's going to come, what is going to come, and what is it going to look like. And one of the things that really became clear for me over the last week was this paradigm shift from the way we have been doing things to the new way that we will be doing things. And one of the best ways to explain that is the current era we're just leaving is an era of search, and it's an era of information, right? So it's the information age. It's the second information revolution. The first information revolution was the printing press. And this is the second information revolution from 96 to 2023. And in that era, it had certain characteristics, but we're going from the information age to the age of understanding. So from information to understanding, right? And information was kind of like we would search for something on the web and we'd get like a bunch of results and we'd read 10 web pages, and then we would create our understanding from reading those 10 web pages. So that's the age of information. In the age of understanding, right, we go and we search differently. We search in a more conversational way. But then the computer will go, and instead of just looking at 10 web pages, it looks at 10 million web pages, and it synthesizes an understanding for us and brings that understanding back to us, right? Like we no longer have to be the ones reading the web pages, synthesizing the information and creating understanding. Now the computers read the web pages, the computers synthesize the information, and the computers create understanding to provide us a higher level of understanding, right? Which we can then, take that understanding and bring that into ourselves, read it and understand it. And so that's really a big paradigm shift, and kind of gaining clarity on sort of that wording and kind of seeing it that way has helped me kind of wrap my head more around, the transformation that is occurring with generative artificial intelligence. The next interesting thing, which was also in the notes, was that ChatGPT 3 was trained on 175 billion parameters. So if you think about a function, a parameter is like an input to a function, right? So you could think like, wow, there's 175 billion different parameters that were inputs to the overall functionality of which is ChatGPT. And so that's ChatGPT 3. ChatGPT 4, which is supposed to be released this year, and which, unofficially there are rumors that, people with higher level connections are already building APIs and building applications off of ChatGPT 4. But ChatGPT 4 is going to be trained on 100 trillion parameters. So GPT 3, 175 billion. GPT 4, 100 trillion. So it's a factor of like what? Like 100, that's like 50 times more, 50x more parameters in ChatGPT 4. I don't know how strongly that correlates with performance, if there's going to be a 50x increase in performance, but it's obviously going to have improved functionality. The next thing that was interesting for me to learn was that ChatGPT 3, was trained with, it cost about $5 million to train it. And I'd heard much higher figures. So when I actually saw that, I was like, well, that's not that bad. And so that was interesting. And there's a 60% year over year decrease in artificial intelligence training costs. And so what that tells you is that, like, if they were to train ChatGPT 3 today with 175 billion parameters, right, it would be 60% less than a year ago. So if a year ago was $5 million, then this year it would be like, $2 million, right? 60% less. And so what that kind of points towards is this exponential sort of acceleration of technology, and that this is just going to be something which becomes more pervasive and ubiquitous. That's the takeaway. It's something that's going to be like machines that could do this amazing thing, which have astounded me and maybe astounded you, right? Mustaine, are you recording this, by the way?
Yes, sir, recording. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So machines that can do this amazing thing like ChatGPT, which astounded me when I experienced it, that's only going to become more prevalent and common. And so that all kind of says, right, like, man, if we could find an opportunity in the space, fantastic. So the next thing I'll share with you is I met with the venture capitalist. He's, literally lives 2 doors away. Our kids play together. Well, his son plays with my daughter. And we had a good meeting. He's involved in a variety of different companies from an investment standpoint, and also from a sort of active standpoint in one of the companies. But he is like, yeah, the door's open. Keep me updated. I'd be willing to chat with you more about it, And so, that's kind of the there's an open door is the main takeaway. And if we could build something which is extraordinary, then fantastic. Before I say a little bit more about the VC, I just want to also speak to other people in the community. So I've got some other people in the community, if we build something, who have really great credentials, which could jump in. I've shared that before. They could jump in and we could see if they'd be interested in jumping in. But right now they're kind of looking for something to do. So I think that, that's a good possibility. But the main thing for us is to try to find the right idea and then to build it. And so there's a variety of factors that go into that. And now getting back to the conversation, last week, I said, hey, we're not closing the door. We were all very excited with what we came up with, idea we came up with last week. I said, we're not closing the door. We're still exploring. Are there other ideas, better ideas? What else would we do? And really selecting the idea, that's one of the most important things, because if you choose the wrong idea and you invest a lot of resources in building it, it's still the wrong idea, right? And so choosing the right idea and then building it is really extraordinary. And it doesn't have to be earth-shattering. We don't have to create the rocket that goes to Mars, right? We could create, something that only gets us to the top of a mountain, right? We don't have to build the most amazing. If we do build it, great, but right, it could just be. So just to illustrate what I'm trying to convey here, one of the companies that the VC told me about is a company that uses chat. It's been around for a couple of years, but it uses chat to increase attendance at K through 12, kindergarten through 12th grade schools. And a year and a half ago, is valued at $15 million. This year, just now, it's valued at $120 million. And all they do is they have software that will, when students are absent, it'll communicate with the student, it'll communicate with the parents, it'll gather data, it has some understanding about how to communicate effectively. But now that just to increase attendance in schools and to, do all whatever that stuff, keep kids in schools, it's valued at 120 million US dollars. And some states have adopted the software for all the schools in their states. And so, right, that's not like a gargantuan huge idea, but it's worth $120 million. Likewise, the VC told me about a friend of his who built an education company to train people's sales forces, right? And so all that platform does is train their sales forces. And he sold that platform for $800 million USD. So it doesn't have to, it could be a pretty niche idea, right? And it doesn't have to be earth-shattering, the next Google, right? Or the next Facebook, amazing if it was, but if not, if it's just one of these ideas that generates 100 million USD or 800 million USD, that would make us all happy, right? There's 30 of us on this call, divide 30 into 100 and, we're all set, So that's the next thing I wanted to say. And then also on the call, we talked about the idea, or also with my neighbor, we talked about the idea of, using this natural language processing and then converting that to text and creating understanding from it and generating meeting minutes. And I did a little bit of research into that. There's already companies out there that generate meeting minutes, right? And so we would be kind of competing with them. And one of the principles of building a company is if you can do something that nobody else has done, right? If you're the first entrant, that's a real advantage. And so, all right, well, there's already people out there that are doing some of this stuff. Maybe we could compete with them. Maybe we could make something better. But that's a little bit of not quite as great as if there's nobody doing it yet. And then the other principle for building a great company is two of them here. you have to solve a problem. That's the first one. And then the second one, you have to be able to convey that in one sentence or two sentences. So this is a direct quote from the venture capitalist. Can you all still hear me? Give me some feedback.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we are all
Yes,
hearing.
yeah. Oh, it's all good. All right. So the two principles: solve a problem, convey it in one or two sentences. And this is a direct quote from the venture capitalist. He said, it's really that simple, right? In one or two sentences, you have to tell me why you're different, what you're doing, how you solve a problem. It can't be complex. It can't be esoteric, right? It's just like, here is the problem we solve. One sentence, right? Two sentences, right? So it's really that simple. You have to be able to convey what you're doing in one or two sentences. That's one principle. And the other principle is that you have to solve a problem. Solve a problem. What's the problem? And, you know, we've talked about this before, but we talked about it last week, but it's also just really good to hear it sort of articulated by the VC. And so those were some of the main, and then we talked about the idea, right? And he was like, that idea is going to require a lot of processing power to translate, you know, a lot of machine power to take all that voice content, turn it into text. And you're going to have a lot of storage, right? So there's actually some pretty big infrastructure costs doing that. And he knows this because one of the companies that he's invested in currently creates software to clean up audio and do help with facilitate natural language processing. And so he has some insight into the machine costs of processing language at scale. So all of that, you know, we were in his kitchen, we were talking, and some music was playing. And somehow we started talking about, so here's the next idea. Somehow we started talking about the music service he was using. And I was like, is this Amazon? Is it Spotify? And he said, no, it's Napster. I'm like, I didn't know Napster is still around. And he's like, yeah. I was like, he said, I like using Napster because they pay more royalties to the artist. Out of all the other streaming services, they give the musicians more money. And then I started thinking about dalle. I was like, well, that's interesting because a lot of artists are really concerned about dalle. Just like back in 1999, musicians were concerned about their music and not being paid for it because there was all this file sharing, right? Today, a lot of artists like photographers, painters, right, graphic artists, they're concerned that they're not going to be paid for their art, for their work, for their creation, because now there's a machine that can create art for us, right? And it could even create art in the style of an artist, right? So you could go in there and you could say, hey, I'm a dental office. I need some paintings for my office, right? Like I run a dental office. I need some paintings for my office. And I want like a picture of a girl in a dentist chair in the style of Banksy. So Banksy's an artist, right? And then it could print out that and I could print it, right? And I could hang it on my wall. Well, Banksy's not currently going to get paid for that. And that's interesting, right? Or we could say, hey, why don't you create a photograph for me in the style of Dan Robinson, or a painting for me in the style of Dan Robinson? So Dan Robinson's a painter. He's my cousin. He's pretty successful. And why don't you create this painting for me of, I don't know, Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk in the style of Dan Robinson? It'll create that painting for me. Or you could say, create a painting for me like of an American football player in the style of Van Gogh, right? It'll create that for me. And then I have a digital copy of it. So, you know, I started to think and talk with the venture capitalists about, is there some way, there's this kind of thing that happened with musicians and Napsters, and now we have streaming services and the musicians are getting paid. Like something similar needs to happen with photographers and painters, right? And so what would that look like? Well, and how hard would it be to build? And so so that's the problem to be solved, right? Because it was a problem that was faced with musicians. Now it's a problem that's being faced with painters and photographers and graphic artists and people who do that stuff. So there's a problem. How do we solve that problem? And when we started to hash it out, it looked like it was from an infrastructure standpoint, a pretty easy problem to solve. So we create a website or we create a service, and the service is going to interface with two APIs. One API it's going to interface with is dalle, image creation, right? And so people could come to our website and they could say, create a painting for me in this style, right? Or create a photograph for me in this style, make it black and white, whatever. right? They could come to our website and use their interfacing with dalle to create the painting. And then we interface with another API to a company that prints stuff. They could print it out like a photograph. They could print it out like an oil painting on canvas, right? So people can come to our website and they could create art in a style of, or just whatever. They could create art and then they could print art and it gets shipped to them. And the website that prints it and ships it's like a drop service, a drop shipping kind of company, right? Where they take a cut of the printing, right? But we don't have to put together all that infrastructure. It already exists. Those companies already exist. All we do is create a website that interfaces with those two APIs, dalle, and then also the printing. And then and then also what we also add into that is that now artists can be paid. Okay, so like if somebody comes to the website and says create a painting for me in the style of Dan Robinson of the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, right? We could then give Dan Robinson some of the money from that sale. So we charge the person $80 or something for that. And then maybe Dan Robinson gets $8, 10%. And so even though he never painted that, because his sort of, his entire gestalt, who he is, right? His essence, right? Who he is as an artist, that informed the creation of this piece of art, right? Like, he created a mode, a genre, which is him, Dan Robinson. And then this machine, dalle, created a piece of art drawing upon that. And so he's going to be compensated for that. And he'll receive some money from it. And so this is like a really wonderful sort of proposition because it's solving the problem that artists have of not being paid for their work. And so people could come there and they could create their own stuff in the style of other artists. The artists get paid, it gets printed, it gets shipped to them. If you're an interior designer, right, you could say, hey, I need a piece that is, 12 feet by 8 feet, kind of a regular piece. And I want it with these colors and these styles. And you could, kind of get different options that would fit perfectly in that space, both in size, both in feel, both in content, both in the content and the expression of the content, the form, right? You could have 10 different, 20 different options, and then you could choose from those options, print one, and it arrives at your door and the artist gets paid, and we facilitated it all and we take a cut. And then in addition, the thing which is great about this idea is it's a win-win, right? So it's a really positive, it's a collaborative, it's a community oriented, it's grassroots, it's thinking about the individual artists, right? And so that makes it, and it's using this new technology, and that makes it a really newsworthy story. And so we're going to get free public exposure. We're going to get free exposure for that, free press. And so, hey, look at this amazing new service. It's upending how you decorate, commercial spaces. It's upending how you decorate your home space, right? And it's also, so we get a lot of free press. And then, and that's marketing, and that's getting people to the site, which is one of the big problems. And then it enables that individuals to become artists, right? So I no longer have to know how to paint or draw to create art. Like I could start to, like I'm really into football, I'm really into Van Gogh, paint me a picture of an American football player in the style of Van Gogh. And I have just created this really anomalous, different, unique work of art that has never existed before, right? Which is drawn upon different concepts. But all I had to do is kind of be the one who put these different concepts together. And so I get to start creating really interesting art. And this can get really fascinating and beautiful. And just to illustrate, somebody created a piece of art which won. They used dalle, and it won the entire art fair competition in Colorado, the state of Colorado, in Denver. It won the art fair, and this was like a year ago, right? Like it beat out all the people who created stuff normally. And he just created it on dalle, but it was his unique vision and idea and bringing together these different concepts that created this extraordinary, piece of art. So just to illustrate what this might look like, I want you to create a painting for me of a bowl of soup that is a portal into another universe, right? Like that's a really interesting painting, And, you know, so that was one idea that I saw somebody do already. And it was like, wow, that's beautiful. And so it allows people to also start to, you know, play with it. And it has this sense of like engagement and joy that not a lot of people have discovered. So I think that I think that's a great idea. I think it's something that we could have up and running in 2 weeks. And the last API we'd have to connect with would be Stripe, which is payment processing. Obviously, there'd be more to building it, but that's the idea. And this is what I need. This is what I need from you. So you're getting this content, you're recording it, or also Mustaine and all of you. This is where I need you to start writing down the actionable items from what we need to work on until we meet next time. So one item we've already done. My wife did a cursory sort of investigation into Dalle's policies and whether or not you could use the Dalle website API to print work and for commercial purposes. And it looks like we
How do you
can.
spell it?
But we need somebody to read
Dalle?
that. Huh? What?
How do you spell it, the Dalle? How do you spell it?
Oh, DALL. DALLE. It's part of OpenAI, right? So OpenAI has ChatGPT, and then they also have Dalle, DALLE. So
yeah,
we need somebody to read through OpenAI's Dalle policies that we could use it for commercial purposes. And that's the first thing. So somebody needs to do that. And Mustaine, you could kind of coordinate who's going to do this afterwards. The next thing we need is we need somebody to start playing with Dalle OpenAI's API, right? So we need you to, I don't even know if there is an API yet. I'm pretty sure there is, but I'm not certain.
Yeah, there is.
So we need somebody to.
Yeah, there is a API for Dalle.
There is, yeah.
Yeah, there is API for Dalle.
Yeah.
Sir,
yeah.
Sir,
so we need somebody.
Sir, I have another solution as well, like Dalle. Even we don't need Dalle's API, or we may keep it beside this, but I have an open source solution for this kind of generative AI image generation solution. So it's a, have you heard the name of diffusion algorithm, diffusion?
Yeah, I've heard something about that, but
yeah, so there is a library called Stable Diffusion. So we can use Stable Diffusion and generate our own application. This is absolutely free of cost, and it's an open source solution. So at first we are getting our hands dirty using that applications. So gradually we will build our own platform. So in my past I also have machine learning experience. So I just never did it in any commercial projects, but in future it seems if we very likely going to start AI venture, so definitely we have to you have to invest some of our engineers fully developing our own solution. Maybe.
Yeah, that sounds good. But let's keep it simple at the beginning. I love it. And so the next actionable item is let's investigate both Dalle and also diffusion. Okay, so that's the next one, right? The API that's going to connect to creating the images, whether it's diffusion or Dalle, that needs to be investigated. And then also people need to start coding with it and seeing what is it like to which one works better, which one creates better images. That's the first step of the investigation, which one creates better images. And then people need to start coding with it. And does it function well when we connect with the API? So that's the second takeaway. All right.
Yeah.
Then the third takeaway or the third actionable item is that we need to look for a printing service that could print things, white label drop shipping. Right?
Yeah, like
so
a print on t-shirt,
what's the service
print on t-shirt, print on mugs, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and print on canvas, print out a picture, right, and ship it. So we need, somebody needs to look into the American company. It needs to be an American company because we're going to be running here in America. But somebody needs to find, here are the 3 that look the best to me. and they need to find those and then start programming against them to see which one, right, works the best. Okay.
Yeah.
And then once we find those three, I could test them here and send like something to be printed at each one of those and see what the product looks like when it comes back. So I want to get all this done by next Monday, if we can, because moving fast is essential. Like if we get, I kid you not, if we get this build in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, I could take this back to the VC and say, here, look what I built. And then at that point, him or others could be like, cool, let's put $500,000 against it and see what happens, right? Like we could be funded in 3 weeks or in 4 weeks if we build this and it's running, and he could create some art and it's really a great user interface and it gets shipped to his house. He'll be like, wow, that was amazing. I'll fund that, right? And then we could start getting press, and then we could start getting sales. And then 6 months from now, we're all like, yeah, baby. Okay, so we've got those actionable items. Investigating dalle versus diffusion, reading their terms of service, right? Investigating print on demand, and then I have a corporate structure already set up in America that is needed to connect with Stripe. And so also we need to be able to connect with Stripe and do payment processing. So Mustaine, you're kind of the lead contact on the ground. And you need to identify and find the people who could do each of these individual elements. And you know, like JavaScript, right, with the APIs is going to be essential, but we need to find those people. And then I have an idea for what the website could look like. Simple is best, and a little, so when we get ready to building what the front interface looks like, we can start brainstorming that. But that's basically it. Thank you for listening. I'm super excited to collaborate with all of you. I need you as much as you need me, which is a perfect team, right? Like I'm bringing strengths to the table. Mustaine's bringing strengths to the table, right? Like you all have something to contribute. And whatever that is, we need to bring it forth, and we need to do the work, and we need to do it quickly. And if we do all this, we could be, we could have something wonderful and beautiful. And again, not closing the door on some idea coming along that's even better. But I'm liking this one better than the last one. After investigating the last one because of the infrastructure processing costs of processing voice to text and storage, and then like how do you actually get customers. And I think this one has the potential to do something. There's no guarantees, but I think it's got potential. All right, what are your thoughts?
Yes, sir, I totally agree with this, because we are trying to solve one big problem, which is artists. They are not getting revenue, or they are not getting paid whatever they have. I mean, they are not they are cheated actually because of the digitalization. So if we give them a way, then they can get paid, as well as we are creating the doors for others who can explain things better, but who has no experience with drawing skills or any other skills idea, but who has a better explaining capacity, so who can easily join our platform and test our software to make their own image, which is great, and they can immediately publish that image to our platform. Thus anybody can pick them. They can publish it as a free, or maybe a very minimal charge, like 5 cents, 2 cents, or whatever. Yeah, so they can sell their products. We just monetize whoever buying their software. We'll get the royalty or anything else. So we will make a model, make a process. How do we give them the royalty? How do we whoever going to buy the picture or graphics, how he make sure he is not cheating us, or he is getting the proper copyrights, whatever. So these things need to be sorted, which is not a big deal. Maybe your wife could handle that better because she is in the country, so she knows the laws of your country, so you can relate them, you can modify them, and you can adjust to our business policy. So that's it. So that's why I'm liking your this idea as well, because less complexity and more productivity. And as we are all, there are more than 25 developers are already working with us, and if we split the job into small groups, then we hope within 2 weeks it is really really possible to make a prototype, MVP, minimum viable product of our concept. Yeah, so let's do it. Just I can do it from tomorrow, or even from tonight, just exploring how I get all the things together and make it happen.